Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364. 703-795-5364. Operators standing by Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., all times Eastern Standard Time. Remember, taking your emails now as we enter the 20th century, not the 21st, maybe never the 21st. Jack Berkman 2016 at Gmail. Jack Berkman 2016 at Gmail. Well, joining us now, Tom Del Beccaro. I almost had it, Tom. Oh, my goodness. Tom Del Beccaro, acclaimed author, speaker, Forbes contributor, and former chairman of the California Republican Party and fine contributor to this program. Tom, Happy New Year.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. And with the new year, I'm also a contributor at Fox Business News.
Contributor at Fox Business. The resume grows and grows. Congratulations on that. And most of all, a former chairman of the California Republican Party. Anyone to take on that job has my praise and admiration. That is tough job. That's like saying I run the Republican Party in Vermont.
Now, come on now. There's 5 million plus Republicans out here. If only
I thought you were going to say there are 5 Republicans. I thought you were going to say there are 5 Republicans in California. Oh, I've given up on the Golden State. That's another issue. But speaking of the Golden State, one of their most golden members, lovely and golden at age 80. Well, not really, but she used to be lovely. Nancy Pelosi, now Speaker of the House. You know, before we get to substance, is something wrong with her? I mean, 10 years ago, she didn't speak that way. You know, what did she have a stroke? What's wrong? What is this? Did you notice that last night? What's wrong?
Well, Nancy, she's not actually a good public speaker. But she has been.
Right, but she was very different than that a dozen years ago, wasn't she? She was this kind of slurring the words. I mean, something's different about her, I think. There are people who say that she's older. That could well be the case. I don't know.
I'll tell you this: they flat out don't represent their party very well. I mean, I thought Schumer was horrific last night.
He was stiff. Schumer comes across like a boy running for class president or something. It's so stiff. My God, he's been in politics 40 years. If that's the best you can muster on national TV, it's time to quit. Harvard Law and 40 years of politics, he can't give a 5-minute talk. Dear Lord.
No, he can't. And he was obviously the petty partisan.
All right.
I mean, really, think about what he said, the walls don't work. Look, every parent knows that fences work.
Well, I'm a doggy parent. I'm a doggy parent and real daddy to be, and I put up walls for my dog when he can't go into the room, right? They work.
Exactly.
All right.
Of course they work.
Let me ask you this now. Trump, I think, looking at the president's speech. Now, Trump obviously is not a great speaker. That's probably why that's the first time he spoke from the Oval Office. But, the country is used to more elegance and eloquence. Now, that said, I think Trump, for his capability base as a person, gave the optimal speech last night. I think more to the point, it was a speech written specifically for his voice. And I think one of the big mistakes they made with Bush and really his father, 43 and 41, people wrote soaring speeches for them, and they couldn't read them. And watching 43 read a soaring speech was it was cognitive dissonance, right? But this was effectively written for his voice. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree with that. You're right. He doesn't have a smooth delivery. And he's empathetic in person. He's empathetic when he shakes your hand and when he holds you. But it is an acquired art, and you're talking to someone who's done over 3,000 radio and TV shows in his lifetime. It's an acquired art to speak to a camera, because a camera is just this thing there. There's no people. There's no, you can't see. And so you're right. It's a new thing for him.
Very new.
I thought he did okay. He's not great at it, but I do agree that it was a good performance for his level. On the other hand, I think Schumer's was awful, and Pelosi was middling.
He didn't have much. He didn't have far to go to win the game last night. So I think Trump's a clear winner, but he didn't have far to go. Now, here's the problem, though, and there's a big problem with this. Okay, we know what Trump is doing, and we know why he did the shutdown. He's afraid of a primary on the right. He has to assuage the base and mostly the far right, and doesn't want to get hit with the primary. Now, the problem, though, is that let's assume Trump, quote unquote, wins the shutdown showdown. The amount of money he would get for the wall is going to be something de minimis, even under the best of circumstances, right? So because Pelosi can't give him anything substantial, even if she wanted to, she can't, because once she does that, she's got an immediate problem with being thrown out as speaker, I think. And Schumer almost in the same boat. Her boat is worse. She could be tossed out. So what that means is that for Trump, it would seem to me, even a win is not a win. So he's going on television by his choice, raising this to a stratospheric level, but he's kind of backed himself into a corner, doesn't he? Hasn't he?
Well, maybe. Keep in mind, this has nothing to do with the wall. This is about the 2020 election.
No, sure.
And so, look, of course, Schumer a year ago voted for funding. He's voted for funding under Obama. This is the policy of the United States to build walls since the Reagan administration. Why has things changed? Why is Schumer going against his vote in favor of it for Clinton and in favor of it for Obama? Simply to ground and make Trump look bad and to discourage Trump's supporters. Trump was told that. He appeared in December like he would compromise, and then he was reminded about how important this is to his base, and he made a brass knuckles political decision.
Now, maybe could it be that this is part and parcel of the broader continuous Trump strategy of being crazy like a fox? Not crazy, but crazy like a fox. In other words, okay, this shutdown, one thing it's doing is interfering with the rest of Pelosi's agenda, right? Pelosi and Elijah Cummings, Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, they have this big impeachment and investigation agenda with 4 different committees, right? And they want to come at Donald Trump. As long as there's a shutdown, that's kind of interfering, taking the media spotlight away from impeachment. If this were to go on for 3 months, how might that impact Pelosi's incoming new agenda?
Well, I agree that's collateral damage. That doesn't excuse the manner in which they have been fighting this issue. For a very long time, I have said Republicans need to leave Washington, D.C., and expose what's really going on at the border. I ran for U.S. Senate in California. And when I talked about the border, I talked about...
Did you run against Boxer?
I ran to replace Boxer. I debated Kamala.
I got it.
I debated Kamala Harris in the statewide post-debate poll. I beat Kamala Harris. Think about that.
God bless you. You're my hero. God bless you.
And so when the issue is widened, like Trump was doing last night for the first time, talking about drugs and talking about the other issues, it becomes clearer to people that, okay, there is a problem. Republicans should have been doing this for years. So I agree with you that this partial shutdown is delaying the Democrats. That's collateral damage. I agree. But Trump honestly believes in this issue, and wants this issue. This is what he campaigned on.
I don't know. Let's honestly believe. I don't know. Campaigns on it. Yes. Wants to do it. Yes. Honestly believes. That's getting into philosophy now. But let me ask you. I'm not going to get into philosophy here. But let me ask you this now. What do you think of this as a suggestion for the president? What if he said, I want X funding for the wall. In exchange for that, I'll do infrastructure. Does Pelosi do that? Or is that a trap and a trick wherein the Donald would essentially have 2 wins because he could take credit for infrastructure like an Eisenhower?
Well, first of all, I don't agree that what Eisenhower did philosophically. But do I think Trump will Trump will make a compromise. He'll go for $2.3 billion. Or some number. But right now, it's completely focused on that. I don't think it gets far enough to be infrastructure. I think that this will be resolved by the end of the month, and infrastructure it hasn't even come into focus. Could he do something with DACA? Could he give them something else in exchange for this? Yes.
What would they give him for DACA? Let's say he did DACA. But can't, it goes back to the question. Let's say he's willing to do a full-on Obama-style DACA. What would she do? The problem is that even for that, Schumer might do it, but Pelosi's not strong enough to give him a substantial, like she can't say, okay, you do a full DACA and I'll give you 40% of the money for the wall. I say if she does that, she's out. Can she even do that?
Well, no, I think her far left wing, I think of the party,
would they?
isn't that pure on the issue. I think Ocasio-Cortez would go along with that, and I hate to bring up her name because she's outsized, but you know what? She's earned it now at this point. She has created the media. No, I think there is going to be some sort of give and take at the end of the day. And the exact issue, it's not clear to me. I expect this to be resolved by the end of Martin Luther King weekend. That's what they're pushing for. The Democrats now have switched tactics. They're going to send up a Labor Department bill. They're going to send up the Ag Department bill. And
veto them all. He should veto them all. You know what? I am enjoying this. I hope the government remains shut down for 2 years. I think it should. I think it would show the people exactly. Do we need HUD? Do we need the Department of the Interior? Do we need USDA? Do we need the Department of Commerce? Do we need the Department of Energy? Do we need the Department of Education? Leave them all shut down.
I know there's 800,000 people who are non-essential. And,
and I hate to tell you, I take delight in the suffering of federal workers. I do. When they go on television and say they can't pay mortgage, I'm going to admit I enjoy it. I'm going to come right out and say I enjoy it.
And there's a significant number of people who say I'm paying taxes for you to pay your mortgage, and I don't have the sympathy for that. That's a fact.
I love it. Tom Del Beccaro, thank you so much. Acclaimed speaker, Fox Business, Forbes contributor, former chairman of the Republican California Party, and former U.S. Senate candidate in the Golden State. Thank you, Tom. If we're real lucky, we'll be able to have you back. Thank you.
All the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364. Taking your emails now, jackberkman2016@gmail. We're coming into the 20th century, not the 21st, but the 20th. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we will never quit on the Rich family. 703-795-5364. And news will come from the Profiling Project, my organization right here in Arlington, Virginia, over in Clarendon, that will announce a major investigation this week into the death of Bree Payton. And you get the inside scoop, and you hear it first because you listen to Behind the Curtain. Well, joining us now, Jarrett Stepman, contributor at the Daily Signal, and we are going to talk all about AOC. For those of you who don't know, and I bet most of you do, that's Miss Ocasio-Cortez, the new congresswoman from Queens, New York, who actually holds a district once held by, you guessed it, Geraldine Ferraro. Remember that name? Jarrett, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Did you know she has Jerry Ferraro's old district?
I did know that, and I would actually say that she's very much to the left, incredibly, of Geraldine Ferraro. And
she's even to the left of Ferraro, which is very difficult because Ferraro was to the left of Mondale, if you remember, and that's not easy.
That's correct.
That's a lot of left. Well, okay, so AOC now, I guess the same question really as for Trump. Is she crazy or crazy like a fox? Because obviously she's got a mind, she's got an education. I mean, look at this making crazy statement. She said, it's okay to be factually incorrect as long as I'm morally right. Now, that's the kind of thing that Trump would say, right? But maybe she does all this just to keep the media cycle going.
Well, I do think that's part of it, and she is very good at keeping the media cycle going. I think more than a lot of other politicians. I think that's why she's not somebody to be underestimated in this debate, especially because a lot of young people, especially millennials, identify with the word socialism now. It's not something that's entirely uncommon. Just a few years ago, many Democrats would have rejected the idea that they were socialists. It was a common attack, and now she openly embraces it. And for many of young and millennial cohorts, this is seen as a badge of honor, many of whom would say they would rather live under a socialist economy than a capitalist one. So it does show that she kind of represents a new wave of voters and Americans who believe in ultimately very extreme views, although many have ideas that are all over the map and many are quite uninformed. They do have political strength, and they do have a potential to push some of these radical ideas on America.
So her appeal goes well beyond just Hispanics in Queens or Hispanics even nationally. Is she now becoming the new Bernie, where this is a young face to take away Bernie's young millennial support? Bernie's pushing 80. Is that what's going on here?
Absolutely. I think she's definitely got the kind of Bernie groundswell that was certainly a contingent within the Democratic Party for a long time that's been building, and Bernie kind of laid the groundwork for people like Ocasio-Cortez and a lot of other young, very far left progressives who identify as socialists. They call themselves often democratic socialists, but, of course, a lot of socialists, when they get to power, come through democratically. People vote for a lot of bad things. But, yes, she absolutely represents a kind of new wave of far left kind of politicians, and there's no question that she has a lot of support around the country, and she's seen as kind of this fresh new face for some very bad old ideas.
So what maybe the socialists is the left finally figuring out how to market itself? Maybe the left has never been very good at marketing. They're not giving us Dukakis, Mondale, and Jimmy Carter anymore. Not even, maybe they're finding young, attractive women. Is that the new model for the left?
Well, sure. I mean, I think we're seeing the difference between her and Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's struggled to really get a lot of support and a lot of media recognition. I think a lot of it has been kind of laughable, but Ocasio-Cortez is very good at using things like social media. She's good at really getting voters to identify with her. They think of her as somebody, there's an old joke about President George W. Bush. People think they could get a drink with him. Well, people think they could go to brunch with Ocasio-Cortez. That's the way a lot of millennials see this, and it is appealing and tries to get a lot of voters who maybe don't participate in politics to get out and change things, and in many cases bring these kind of radical ideas that they may not fully understand, but they find her personally appealing enough that they'll support her anyway.
Why are young people flocking to these far left-wing ideas? Do we know, I used to have a beautiful young woman before she went away to college, used to be on my show. And she said, her name was Jenkins, and I said, Jenkins, why do you support Bernie? Why do all these young people support Bernie? And I said, what is it that you like? You worried about the environment? Is it gay rights? Is it social? What do you like? She said, no, it's none of those things. Bernie offers us free college. Is that what's going on here?
I think certainly the offer of free things and a kind of potential utopia on Earth is certainly appealing. It's amazing, especially young people who've grown up in the United States, which has been the most prosperous, successful country on Earth and has had so much success because we haven't embraced ideas like those of Ocasio-Cortez. I think a lot of young people don't quite understand.
They wouldn't have iPhones.
Appealing.
They wouldn't have iPhones had we been a socialist economy.
Well, absolutely not. And I think that's something that needs to be pointed out. I think a lot of these people, when they hear socialism, they think, well, that's just something that pulls down the rich and helps the little guy. And the truth is, if you know about the history of socialism and communism, those ideologies, they really only help a well-connected political elite at the top. I suggest that they read the book Animal Farm by George Orwell that shows that those who bring out these ideas often, of course, end up at the top of that pyramid, and the regular people, they get crushed.
Jarrett, as we know, that's a wonderful way to conclude this segment because, as we know, all pigs are equal, but some pigs are more equal than other pigs. Jarrett Simpson, contributor at the Daily Signal, thank you so much.
This is a universe where everything is depicted as a Washington Post political cartoon.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364. 703-795-5364. Operator standing by Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. All times Eastern Standard Time. Remember that for those of you on the West Coast. Taking your emails, jackberkman2016 at Gmail. jackberkman2016 at Gmail. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we will never quit on the Rich family or the city of Washington. We will investigate Seth to the end. And later this week, and you know this because you're watching Behind the Curtain, the Profiling Project, my organization right here in Arlington, Virginia, will launch a major investigation into the death of Bree Payton, my friend who tragically died or was killed. Died or was killed. We don't know how she died. We know how they say she died. Out in San Diego, California, only 26 years old. They say she died of the flu. Personally, I think that's nonsense. Joining us now, Rabbi Aryeh Spero, president of Caucus for America and a columnist for CNS News and The American Thinker. Rabbi, pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you. Good to be here, Jack.
Well, we've got to talk so much. There's so much going on in the Mideast. It's time to turn our attention back to the Mideast. I guess we'll start with the Donald's withdrawal from Syria. Now, I really don't know. I mean, my overall view is the United States has very few interests in the Mideast right now. I mean, of course, aside from supporting Israel and aside from wanting to secure the peninsula, I mean, we have effectively become, we're either break even or we are now a net oil exporter. We don't need oil from Iraq or Syria if they're still putting out any oil, or Libya or any place else. The Europeans need this. We don't need it. I'm not sure what America's interests are in Syria or Iraq. I kind of think the president was right to get our troops out of there. What say you?
I agree with the president. I agree with you. We'll always have a presence in the Middle East. We have ships, powerful ships, destroyers, and ships that launch cruise missiles and Tomahawk missiles that today can pinpoint their target, and they're very accurate. We'll have a presence if we're needed, but we don't need any foot soldiers on the ground. Those are American boys and young women, and they certainly can be killed. It's enough. I think it's since George Bush the first. We're talking now about 30 years of our people being there in the Middle East. A lot of our boys die, our women die. These are sons and daughters of our citizens, and we don't have any vital interest there, especially now that we are the net exporter of oil. Thanks to Donald Trump, he allowed the exploration that the environmentalists stopped doing. And fracking in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, and Wyoming. And so we don't have any vital interest. Now, listen, some Democrat who doesn't like Trump or some never-Trumper or some neocon can say that we have an interest. You can find an interest in anything if you want, but we don't have a vital interest. Now, as far as Israel, there's nobody that's more pro-Israel than me and probably you, but Israel doesn't need us. They've never asked us to fight their war.
No, Israel never told us. I think Israel's quite happy with Assad. I think they've always been happy quietly with Assad.
They don't want anybody to fight their wars. And if there is a war with Iran and Syria and Hezbollah and all these people, I don't want American soldiers on the ground. I'll tell you why. What's going to happen? By accident, the Israelis will do some shooting. There will be some collateral damage. It always happens. Or the Arabs or the Muslims will put their people in the line of fire or make sure that it somehow it attacks Americans, and then Israel will be blamed. So let our boys out of there. If Israel has to go to war, let them fight without worrying about collateral damage against this American. And I think it's a good idea.
Let me ask you this. One thing I've heard this from business people on the ground over there. They're saying the Russians are quietly reaching out to the Saudis. And although Trump has very correctly backed the Saudis in this Khashoggi mess, even though they made a terrible mistake with this, he's correctly backed them and kind of suffocated the issue, thank God. The Saudis apparently are not happy with the United States over all of this, and they feel like they don't have a long-term friend, maybe because they sense the United States is losing interest in the region, and they have started talking to Moscow. Do you make anything of this? Have you heard this? What do you think?
Well, the Saudi prince, the younger one, the fella in his 30s, he did have a meeting with Putin. And I guess they have to do that because, Trump is a wonderful fella. They can rely on Trump, but the Democrats have plans. And even some of the Republicans, unfortunately, have plans to make sure that Trump doesn't have a second term or might not even end his first term. But hopefully, please God, he will end his first term and be reelected. He's the greatest president in my time.
Now, why you have to see the United States? We make this classic. We pursue what Morgenthau would have called the prestige policy. We have this classic overextension. Now, we have a lot more money than when Britain and France, say, did this in the 50s or 60s. But like right now, Pompeo, I think yesterday or maybe today or yesterday, he was over in Turkey worrying about the Kurds and whether the Turks are going to team up with Assad to kill the Kurds in Syria after we leave, this, that, and the other. Why do we even care, other than humanitarian reasons? I mean, why is the U.S. Secretary of State in Turkey talking about Kurds in Syria? I mean, I don't want to be harsh, but I don't really care about Kurds in Syria.
I guess, though, we look at them as great fighters against the Iranians and against certain of the militant Islamic factions. Islam is a threat to the world. Well, militant Islam, which most of the leaders in Islam are militant. The imams seem to be militant. Maybe you can show me one or two that are not. But most of the leaders are very militant. The people that are moving the Islamic community today are quite militant. Even this young woman who was elected from Dearborn, that area, and the Somali woman from up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So there's a lot of threat from militant Islam, and the Kurds do fight them, and they're not asking for our troops. So aside from the humanitarian issue, the Kurds are good fighters, and they're fighting the bad guys. And so while I don't want us to have foot soldiers in the Middle East, but I do want us to be victorious over the bad guys. And if the Kurds can help us do that, that's great.
All right, I'll take your word on that. What's an update? Do we have any update? Okay, the broad dynamic in the Mideast. I mean, all of this is kind of now seen in the context of this battle between Iran and the Saudis. And that battle, as you know, manifests itself all over the region. It's going full pitch in Lebanon, although the Iranians seem to have the upper hand there, but that goes back and forth, each backing various groups in Lebanon, in Yemen, and various other places in the peninsula. The Iranians are involved. Other parts of the Mideast, certainly in Iraq, the battle rages. Saudis backing some elements, Iranians backing the others. This stuff rages all over the Mideast. What's your sense of that dynamic? What's your sense of that conflict?
Well, listen, you're going to have intranascent fights in between Islam versus Islam, inside fighting. You're going to have it because that's the nature of Islam. That since its inception in the 600s, there's always been the fighting between the Shiites and the Sunnis, and then even among themselves. That's never going to end, and that's why I don't want us there, because we're never going to solve any of these Islamic problems. And the best we can hope for is, like, temporarily, we can align with one country to help us with a greater threat. Let's say we'll align with the Saudis to help us against the greater threat of Iran. But there's never going to be absolute peace there. And beyond that, listen, you have Islamic elements that are going into Africa, into areas that were normally black, some of them Christian, in Nigeria, Sudan, and they're causing havoc there. So none of this stuff is going to be settled. I do want to mention, though, that right now the greatest threat is Iran, and we can thank the previous president, Barack Obama, for that, because he provided them $150 billion, plus a nice pallet full of $1.5 billion.
No, he helped. He and John Kerry certainly helped Tehran an awful lot, did they not?
And it started with Hillary Clinton. It was all under the guise of this treaty. But I think really Obama himself personally wanted to save the Iranian regime. And when you give $1.5 billion in cash money in pallets on a secret delivery on a plane, a C-130 cargo to Tehran, you know that's going to be used for terrorism. Why did he do that? He knew it had to be used. They weren't going to use it to be buying chocolates and roses for Valentine's Day. They were using it for terrorism.
I wonder if they celebrate Valentine's Day in Tehran. Okay, let me ask you this. Time remaining here. I want to turn to Arab North Africa. Now, I don't know if you follow what's going on in Libya, but the Libyan state apparently is reforming. There are elements in the U.S. national security bureaucracy that want us involved there. The Libyans now, with their oil sales, have put together a fund apparently of about $3 billion to secure their borders and to have cybersecurity and different things to help the state reform. Apparently now the Russians, Putin wants to get involved in Libya. Now, why Putin would be with the state Russia's in, I have no idea why he would care about Russia being involved in Libya, but I guess for his own prestige purposes he does. Do we have any reason to care about Libya at this point?
Oh, I would be wary. Listen, we were there, and we had that terrible incident in Benghazi, and I don't think we're going to see 100% turnaround. We always have to be afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood. These are very powerful elements, very powerful. And listen, it wasn't so bad when we had Gaddafi there, because after Reagan did what he did, that bombing, Gaddafi, so to speak,
became our friend. He became our friend.
That's right. But all of our enlightened deep staters, when they don't like it when someone's a friend of America, because that, in their mind, is a flaw, because they're very suspicious of their own country, our deep staters. They don't like their own country that they're leading. So I would still be very cautious. It always involves law, men, women, our Treasury. We have people that are not willing to put in a measly $5 billion to protect Americans at their border, and what they would be willing to spend billions
yet they want to spend
into Libya.
They want to toss $2 or $3 billion into Libya. Let me ask you this now. If we look around, let's look east again, back to the Fertile Crescent here in lovely Iraq. Now, people in both parties, of course, many Republicans today criticized the war. Most conservatives blast the Bush family, but it would seem to me that overall the Iraq war is a success. I mean, sure, we still have maybe 15 or 20,000 troops there, whatever, for a small contingent. But overall, Iraq seems to be working. People have predicted its collapse and chaos for 10 years, but the region is a lot better off than when George Bush left office. So maybe the Bush legacy there is a good one.
You know, Iraq was important because it was a buffer against Iran. Iraq and Iran were always fighting each other. I remember when the Ayatollah Khomeini sent in thousands of his own children, Iranian children, to attack Iraq, because children always seem to be their first choice as far as soldiers, and these kids were being blown up by all of these mines that were hidden. But Iraq, any weakness in Iraq always is a strength for Iran, and Iran is the worst that we have to confront today, because they're sowing terrorism not just in the Middle East, but south of our border in South America. They're in Latin America, and they even have certain cells here in the United States. Don't kid yourself. That's why we have to have this border, because it's more than simply migrants coming in that might be MS-13 or drug or criminals. You've also got jihadists. They're being sponsored by Iran, by the money that Obama sent them. You can do a lot with $150 billion. So it was good to go into Iraq to keep it strong. They were a good buffer against Iran, and the weaker Iraq is, the stronger Iran is. Now, as far as the Bushes, listen, it's all easy to be a Monday morning quarterback and to criticize them. George Bush II, the younger, he went into Iraq at the time we all thought it was right. And we did think that Saddam Hussein was a terrible threat. I don't think he was as much a threat today as we thought then, but I don't blame them for it. I think their intentions were right. At the time, I think it was, we all thought it was the right decision, especially Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney's a smart guy, a prudent guy. So we were successful, but I don't know, there's not a strong government there, and the Iranians are pushing and pushing. So it's very difficult. You've got the Iranians coming from the east, and you've got the Hezbollah coming from the south.
Looking back at Syria, what caused Trump to make a precipitous decision on Syria? Was it that he wanted to get rid of Mattis and that was what he needed to do? Is there something else there? Was it genuine? Did he wake up one morning? It just seems kind of strange that Donald Trump would wake up one morning in December and think about Syria at all. I'm a little... What happened there? That's strange. I mean, I think he made the right decision. I don't think we should have ever been there in the first place, but that's a little weird, don't you think?
I think that Donald Trump is actually quite genuine about his decisions. He always puts America first. And I think he had people, though, such as Mattis, that believed in the old way that America has to have foot soldiers everywhere. And it was a way to get rid of Mattis. Mattis and he disagreed on many things. Mattis would have never agreed to relocating our embassy to Jerusalem, as it should be. That's the capital of Israel. Mattis was more of a deep stater. It was certainly a way to finally get rid of Mattis. After the elections, he wanted in this second half to really be free to do what he wants. But, you know, one thing about Donald Trump, he sees things that a lot of people don't. He's a tremendous strategist, and he knows how to put different people together to achieve an outcome that he wants. Most people don't see it. I know what he did in the New York real estate industry. He bought buildings that he bought and refurbished that are now icons, wonderful buildings, and you ask yourself, where were all these hotshot real estate New York investors? Why didn't they do it? He sees things that other people don't. And he might have had some conversations that all of a sudden there was a bulb that went off in his mind and said, listen, why should I have American soldiers there to do this? I can do this and this with this person, and they can end up doing what I want, my goal, without American soldiers. So I think it was those three things. A way to get rid of Mattis. He did have some information that suddenly came in where he saw that we don't have to be there, other people can do the job. And I think genuinely the Israelis probably are in favor of this.
In the time remaining, I want to turn ourselves to the great Satan, the great villain in the Mideast, of course, is ISIS. Now, what we're hearing is that ISIS is largely defeated. Do you see that? Is ISIS, I'm hearing they're about 10% of their original strength, or where they were 2 years ago. Is that true?
ISIS, though, is like a cancer. Even if you have radiation and you get rid of it, it can always metastasize, can always come back later. You won't get rid of ISIS. We've gotten rid of their let's say, their infrastructure. They were in charge of certain cities, or they were able to roam freely and do what they want. They had like a mini government within states. So maybe that part has been weakened, no question about it. And that's what Trump wanted from Mattis, and he let him do that. But the ISIS is an ideology. And that's never going to completely be liquidated because it's part of that Islamic culture, the idea of a caliphate, the idea of getting land for Allah. So whether Rabbi
Spero, Rabbi, if we're real lucky, we'll be able to have you back again. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
All the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Why don't you get a toupee with some brains in it?
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
And now from Boise, Idaho, of all places, Melissa Levick joins us, one of the nation's great entrepreneurs, great female entrepreneurs, and she is going to talk about different kind of topic altogether, and that is how to create more female businesses. One of the things we're seeing under President Trump, there has been an increase in female businesses. There's been a huge increase in African-American businesses, almost as large an increase in Hispanic businesses. Just about every demographic you can think of, and we've talked about so many of these themes, has grown in the last 2 years almost miraculously. In the case of the African-Americans, exponentially. Some of the best news for African-Americans in American history. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jack.
My pleasure. But of all the growth in entrepreneurship, women kind of still lag behind. And I know this, you know this, I know this from personal experience. I think I've been in business for 22 years in my own company. I can tell you in those 22 years, I think I've had a grand total of 3 companies, maybe of 3 of 500 or 3 of 600 that are run by women. And that's about 1%. And we cast a pretty broad net. Is that consistent with your experience? Do you see changes? What do you see going on out there?
Absolutely. You know, it is a growing number, but statistically 17% of startup founders are female. So it is pretty small. We're not quite at the equilibrium that we would like to be. And also, female founders only get 2% of VC funding. About 79% goes to all male teams, and the difference between the two is kind of the mix, a male-female team. But there is a little bit of inequity there in terms of how many women are actually starting their own companies and also getting funded to grow their companies.
See, that's really the key. You're enlightening us because that's really the key number, that percentage of VC funding. Just for our audience, the VC is a venture capitalist. That's a person who brings money to a business. So that's really the key. So that could be the key to a lot of this stuff, like the same thing with black businesses or Hispanic businesses. We may have the business starts, same with women, but if they don't get that funding, those businesses could die in 12 months anyway. So the real number might not be the number of starts, but that percentage of VC funding. And that 2% is low enough, it might be the same as it was 40 years ago.
Yeah, it is. It's still pretty low. Deal count in terms of how many female-led companies that are actually getting investment is at a historic high. It's at 4.4%. But that still is a very low number. It's only 358 women have actually pitched VCs. So the percentage is higher, but that's because the overall number is still low, right? And so, like you said, this is a key differentiator. You can start a business, but it's really difficult to stay in business or grow a business without growth funding. And so it does come down to we need more women to start them, but we also need people to invest in women as well.
I guess you have now. What would you say the main reason for that is? That there just aren't enough women pitching VCs? Is there sexism in the VC culture? Is it that almost all VCs are white males? I guess they are. Is that what's going on there? Is that true?
I think it's all of the above. I do. I think that, we are in the past 2 years, in light of the political environment, in light of the Me Too movement, in light of a bunch of different, it's been kind of a big surge for women in society in the past 2 years. And a lot has come to light in terms of the sexism that is there. I do think that less women also start businesses still. And I think that is on us to really, dig in, take risks, trust in ourselves, start our own businesses. And also it does come down to you're right. The majority of investors are white males. The majority of investors don't understand a lot of the businesses that women are starting and don't also see kind of the huge potential behind it. I'll give an example right now of where I'm at, right? I'm starting a boxing studio.
Melissa, I wish we're going to bring you back. Our producer, we are out of time, but I want to bring you back. We got to continue this. We're already lighting up the boards here with a lot of questions in Facebook. We got to bring you back if we can. Melissa Levick, great entrepreneur from Idaho. Thank you, Melissa, so much. We'll see you next week.